Interesting, very interesting. And, it made me reflect on, the importance of native wisdom now, native knowledge. That's something your story touches upon as well.
Yes.
So thank you for that, Ayushi. Alina, I'll move to you for the next few questions, and maybe we can pause for audience questions, and then we'll continue again. We'll resume again. So my next question to you, Alina, is there's a beautiful balance in this anthology. It's not entirely dystopian. At no point is a reader, fear invoked in a reader. The stories are tactful, they're sensitive, and they're candid. So how difficult was it, Alina, to strike that balance as an editor?
A classic. No, so I was gonna say that it's I feel like the stories were chosen for their inherent merit, right? So like it was an open call. We didn't exactly solicit writers. So it was an open call, and then we got a bunch of entries, and as always, it's very difficult actually to pass through everything and like select the best stories. Also, I don't really believe in that superlative, right? Because the stories that I wanted to assemble together made sense for this particular anthology. So um one is that the stories came with their own inherent like identity, I would say. And the writer's kind of DNA. And this is the trick with anthology. This is also the first anthology I'm editing. I've only edited like singular pieces before. But this was a bit of a learning curve for me as well, because I wanted to work with the writers to enhance the story to the best readability and the most engaging form that the story could be, while the stories also spoke to each other. And some of that, thematically, of course, there's a lot of overlapping themes. I feel like that's the easiest thing to crack. But certain things I think I've worked with the writers was to achieve like stylistically. So it's things happening maybe in the subtext a little bit that may not be very clear to just a reader, but it's something that has been technically put together, right? So I would say that most of the stories play a lot with negative space. There's a lot that happens off screen, for example. The pacing in a lot of the stories is, I wouldn't say similar to each other, but reflective of each other. So there were these sort of slight technical sleight of hands that I tried to employ to give the stories a more cohesive feel overall. I mean, to be honest, like if I was to go back and edit it, I would definitely change around the order, for example. But that's just the curse of the writer or the editor. There's always something you can change. But I do want to say that the stories that I eventually selected already had a strength of character, if I can use that phrase for writing. And then it was just a matter of working with the writer to ensure that the story could truly sing. So yeah, half the work was just done by the fact that the idea existed and had come to me. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I can really sense that strength of character in more stories. Um, yeah. So my next question is, you see, when with stories, especially when you use fiction to speak about climate change, fiction as a tool, there's always this, confusion of overloading information, and there's too much information going into the stories. But this anthology didn't have that, demerit, and the stories, kind of flowed smoothly. So how, to any aspiring author,
Yeah.
how would you, suggest hitting that emotional nerve in reader through climate change, climate fiction stories? So what would be your suggestion?
I feel like I've just edited the anthology. The writers have written it, so they know better. But maybe we can ask them as well. But for me personally, it would be uh, not pontificating, right? Because I do feel a lot of reportage on climate change does tend to do that. The language matters. What are you reducing the entire sweep of civilization to? To give you a small example, like Prithvir's story is quite funny. It's got a tongue in cheek. It's obviously quite dark and it's tackling a very dark matter. But when I was reading it, even for the first time before any of the edits, I was kind of laughing out loud. And I think knowing Prithvi a little bit, I feel like that's what he's really good at, amongst other things, right? So he played to that strength. So it's like when you're experiencing the story, you're like relating to the protagonist Ravi. You're sort of resonating with his anger and his frustration, because all of us at some point have faced that frustration, in different aspects of our life. So I would say that, like, leaning into your strengths as the kind of writer you are and weaving that into the story you're writing without worrying about, like, oh, what does this say about climate change, or what is the point it's trying. I feel like, writers should not, the minute you try to make a point is when you, like, really lose the story to a large degree. I feel like if you set out to observe to the best you can, and, like, you set out to sort of, chronicle a moment in time or a certain behavior or a certain shift, then that's your job. And if you do it well, then that's your job done, right? So yeah, for example, like, Prashant's story has, uh, the way I read it, had a slightly more, like, traditional structure, which worked, which was its strength. So that's something that he could have kind of, honed further. And it like, in many ways, when I read Prashant's story, I was like, oh, this could be the beginning of a novel, actually. It had that sort of classic, this thing, right? So yeah, I mean, I can really go on about what each of the stories really brought, but I would say that, like, lean into your own voice as a writer, irrespective of whether you want to talk about climate change or gender or labor. I feel like that comes second. Each writer, like, through their life, has recurrent preoccupations that occupies their work. But I feel like, instead of sort of being in your head about it, it's better to perhaps pursue a character or a story, right? And let the concerns be the subtext, so to speak.